I always say that joining the alliance really helped us build the whole strategy to get to net zero. If we wouldn't have joined the alliance, we wouldn't have had the technology, the advice, and the guidance to get it done. So it was only by joining the alliance where we had access to all the science, to all the publications, the research, and the resources that the alliance offers to folks like us.
Well, the alliance helps enormously a lot, starting with all its expert teams. It's of course great that colleagues of mine can join these expert teams and can learn such a lot of detailed approaches and key elements for enhancing our investment decision making.
For the David Rockefeller Fund, one of the major challenges that we think about is climate risk itself as it threatens our portfolio's long-term returns. And so our approach to net zero focuses heavily on climate solutions. These are investments in the solutions that drive the transition directly. And we've committed 10% of our portfolio to new private market climate solutions investments as part of our 2025 target. This also is a huge opportunity because we see that investing in climate solutions allows us to lean in to building the new green economy that we know is coming in time for 2050. The way that the Asset Owner Alliance has helped us to address this challenge is both through the working group focused on climate solutions, as well as through the standards on climate solutions investments in the target setting protocol.
In our net zero journey on the investment side, the first thing the Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance brought is capacity to incorporate the climate risk and the climate dimension into our daily investment decision. I think it's a clear benefit for us. It's an ongoing journey and a learning process as well, but we are moving in that direction. The second is also the recognition the NZAOA brings to our plans, to our target.
The major strengths of the Net Zero Asset Owners Alliance, one, it was the first of the Net Zero alliances. It was a trailblazer, but it has always been a first mover and doer in defining what credible net zero commitments need to look like from the financial sector. The reality is that if we're going to solve the climate crisis, we need all financial institutions to be aligned with the goals of the Paris Agreement.
I think the first thing to say is that you've got asset owners who've come together in a very serious and focused way to identify those targets they need to meet to be able to create net zero in their portfolios. I think that's in itself a great success. But also I think that ability to come together and collaborate and share is also really important to recognise. No single asset owner who recognises the systemic risks of climate change can address these issues on their own. They do need to work together, and they need to work together with their peer group. And the fabulous thing about the Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance is that you've got leaders who are sharing their experience, their learnings to tackle this very difficult but absolutely required objective of decarbonising our portfolios and decarbonising the economy.
One of the significant achievements that I'm most proud of is our target setting protocols, which are updated every year. Within target setting for the Asset Owner Alliance, we focus on 5-year interims. And this is particularly helpful because it focuses us on actions that we can and should urgently take today, while we also prepare for the intermediate term.
Creating a common platform of knowledge throughout the industry with a growing impact as the membership grew exponentially recently. That's point one. The second point is also about the transparency vis-à-vis our stakeholders, invested companies, on the very clear target setting protocol. And the last one, which is also very important for me, is the focus it created on execution with a clear aim on decarbonizing our portfolios.
We have increased like 4 or 5 times the number of participants and the commitment of those participants. And the second thing is the goals that have been set by all those participants. Those goals and targets are very ambitious and are very timely. And if you add all those commitments from all the participants, it's a very good way forward for all of us.
The most significant achievement is that it got the ball rolling. So in 2019, the Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance was the first group within the financial system to set 2050 net zero as a target with interim targets along the way. Since then, the growth within the financial system, within the private sector has been significant, and it has had very much direct influence also on the action of governments. The Asset Owner Alliance was the first and only alliance to initially set 2025 as the first interim target. Most other alliances have focused on 2030. And most importantly, the members within the alliance have been working together to put in place the policies, procedures, and the actions to actually start to bend the curve.
The most significant achievements of the Asset Owner Alliance were to build over these 4 years a very, very consistent approach how to manage climate action for investors, but also to be an example and others can use and build on. And thirdly, to be a group of financial institutions that show that climate action is doable, that 1.5 degrees is not only a life, but can be clearly a guiding principle.
We know what needs to be done to decarbonize the global economy. We need to end our addiction to fossil fuels. So therefore, we need companies, governments, and financial institutions to be fully invested in a just and equitable transition. And we need alliances, companies in the alliance of the Net Zero Asset Owners Alliance to be leading the way in supporting and investing in this just and equitable transition.
One of the most important things is that we've got to keep the aspiration of 1.5 alive. The second thing I think we need to do is make sure that we're getting the right public policy settings that enables private capital to go to work. We don't have quite the right conditions at the moment. This is not a financing problem. This is a problem of getting the right policy settings that gets that capital going to work.
Regarding 2025, my hopes for the Net Zero Asset Owner Association is to continue to expand its reach by expanding its membership. And the second one is also around that we are able to reach our goals that we set ourselves a few years ago and pass that first milestone to show the credibility of our action and demonstrate that we can actually move the needle.
So some of the work that the Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance is doing to continue to develop its targets and standards are extremely helpful to the David Rockefeller Fund as we look to the future. This includes the work that the Asset Owner Alliance is doing on standards for private market assets, for sovereign bonds, as well as for climate solutions, and importantly, the net and net zero carbon removals.
We're moving on from commitments and setting targets to delivery. As I mentioned, we are already starting to see that, but that has to significantly scale up. And it has to cover the breadth of industries, of sectors that are relevant to the climate challenge. And we have to admit that there's a lot more work to get the focus that's needed there. As we've heard recently from the International Energy Agency, we are starting to predict for the first time a peak in fossil fuels. So that's a positive development.
All and foremost, I do hope that we in the Asset Owner Alliance can continue with what we have been showing over the last 4 years, which is setting targets, implementing measures, and with this show that we really can work towards the 1.5 degrees. And if we continue to do so successfully, we will build more and more trust into financial markets.
My one message to the principals and members of the Net Zero Asset Owners Alliance is simple. We have your back. Continue to do what you are doing. We need you to be champions of credibility.
Climate action is absolutely needed by financial institutions. And in order to really follow through, you must implement the basics.
I would say for those asset owners that have not joined the Alliance, the first question was why they have to join. We have a commitment, we have a common commitment as humanity to drive our whole economy to net zero.
We were so lucky that the Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance had been founded because we saw that there was a group of others already successfully working on setting and delivering these targets, a community that we could join, learn from, and contribute to, not only in the benefit of our own portfolio's work, but to be able, working in alliance, to be able to move with a broader community towards addressing the concerns that affect the David Rockefeller Fund and everyone on the planet.